Back to recovery, understanding that your players are going to recover from the diagnosis of a concussion at different rates, and also that all of these kids are also students. So their most important thing will be getting back to being able to be a regular student. Next will be activity. I'll just kind of go through return to play algorithm that we have that you guys won't worry about, but your player might come in at some point during those steps. So initially, before a player can come back or an athlete can come back, they have to have no symptoms just sitting here. So if you have any symptoms right now of headache, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, photophobia, which is light bothering them, great. So then you can start very, very mild exercise, like maybe jogging for 10 minutes, seeing if the symptoms come back then. No symptoms, then you can progress to the next stage. And these happen over a series of days. They're not all in the same moment. The next thing, which is a point where you might see your player back, depending on their age, is that they're allowed to come to practice. They're allowed to maybe shag balls, maybe do some minimal passing drills, but be a part of the team. They just have to have no contact and not a lot of exercise. And then the next step will be much more exercise, so running and really getting the blood flow to the brain and understanding how that is affecting their signs and symptoms, and getting them back to the exercise level of playing soccer, but not physical contact yet. So can they tolerate a full practice without physical contact? So all the sprinting, all the running, the drills where there's not going to be any not scrimmage. Can they do that and not have any symptoms of concussion? And it's not until that point where the player will be allowed back on the field. For the little kids, the younger kids, the coaches here that coach the little kids, probably all that would take place at home. And basically, if you've got an 8-year-old, they're probably just going to be told to stay home by the doctor and get reevaluated, and eventually that player will come back all well. But the older kids who are really in the competitive soccer or maybe high school looking toward college, they're going to want to come back and be a part of the team as fast as possible. So if you know that your player is coming back, having a diagnosis of concussion, is working their way back, it's really important for you guys to reach out to the parents and understand what is that program. At little plug for Kaiser Santa Clara, we have a concussion clinic, and it's run by 2 of my colleagues. And they would, for instance, if the kid came to our concussion clinic, they would be given, a piece of paper that says exactly what they can do and when they can do it, and a checkbox system for their signs and symptoms, and that could be relayed to you guys as the coaches. I'm sure there are other hospitals and clinics that have concussion protocol as well. I think the more informed you guys are about your particular player and the player coming back, the better it is for you on a lot of levels. You know when your player's coming back, the progress they're making, understanding that back to concussion being a subset of traumatic brain injury. If you say it like that, it sounds very serious, which it is. And I think if you can communicate to your players and to the parents to understand that you guys as coaches, you want the best out of your players, you want the best team, you want to win, of course, but you have concern about these kids going off into the future. Most of these kids will not be professional soccer players, right? But they will be professional something. And we want them to go into that life with the best case scenario in their head, and not suffer long-term damages from concussion and repeated concussion. I will say, because you probably will have heard about something called second impact syndrome, or the idea of having an undiagnosed concussion and then a repeat concussion on top of that, and how that can be really detrimental and even deadly. So those are the cases you probably hear about in the news, where either the kid maybe had a head bump that was recognized, but everyone just sort of said, oh, it's fine, go back and play. and 2 days later they get hit again and then they die on the field. There is actually a lot of debate about whether that's truly second impact syndrome from 2 separate concussions, or if in some of those cases really the first head injury was missed as a bleed to the brain rather than just a concussion, an actual hemorrhage that was missed the first time, and then the second time that bled even more and it caused a catastrophic effect. I do mention it because you might hear about it, or maybe you've read about it, or maybe you've read about these horrible cases that make concussion really scary. We do know that repeated concussions will cause a much more prolonged delay for return to play and maybe never return to play. You probably know all kinds of athletes who have, I know Taylor Twellman, because from watching soccer, he always mentioned how he had concussion and it ruined his career. He had to stop playing early. So there is validity to repeat concussions being bad, which I think everyone would just probably know. But the second impact syndrome is we're not really sure actually exactly what's happening in those cases. I think the point of that is to recognize the first head injury and not allow the second one to occur in such a close time. So I think in the end, the take home is that if you guys suspect concussion or you see a head injury, you just pull that player out of whatever event it is. Is it a game, is it a practice, and let them sit. You'd rather them miss the second half of the game or 1 practice or 2 practices than the entire season because they didn't get diagnosed with their head injury. And I think that's probably the most important thing for you guys to take home, and then you let the parents and the players and the physicians, diagnose, treat, tell you when the player's coming back, and that way you guys have done your job, you've recognized the injury. You don't have to assess the severity, you don't have to diagnose concussion, you just have to see the symptoms. So I actually have a little printout I forgot to mention. If you guys want, you can go to the CDC website. It's at the bottom of this. I think I only printed out about 20, so you can share and you can take a picture of it or something like that. At the bottom is the website. The CDC puts out a whole program called Heads Up. Has a lot of great information on concussion. This is just like the snapshot of the signs and symptoms and what you guys should do as coaches. But there's a lot of great information on that website, so if you have any questions, you can look at the CDC. They will update their suggestions each year. They go through a conference and decide if there's any new updates that they need to do. So it's a really good resource for whatever you forget that I spewed at you tonight. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Don't all raise your hand at once. Yes.
About the helmet the kids use, how much that help?
I'm on tape. This is tough.
It's off now, don't worry.
So actually, the helmets, the studies have shown they don't help. The little pads.
Yeah.
So can they help prevent certain types of head injury? Yes. Concussion, I don't think so. Yeah, because your brain is still moving whether you're hitting a padding or not. If that were true, then no football players can get concussions. We know that's not true. It's the brain rattling inside the skull. It's not what you're hitting, how hard you're hitting. It's just the forces. It's the physics behind it. Can it help you not get a laceration when you go up against someone else? Sure. So I guess that's good. You won't get taken out of the game to get some quick staples in your head. But I mean, you don't see lacerations that often to wear it. But if people feel like they want to send their kids in it, I guess that's their prerogative. But I will say the studies are not showing the benefit, which is too bad because it'd be great if we had a quick fix like that. You could slap the Palo Alto logo on it, and So no, it doesn't help.
Okay, thank you.
So regarding neck muscles, how effective is that in terms of preventing concussions?
It is effective. So the thing is with the littler kids, like 8 and under, they're still got these giant heads wobbling around, so they're more susceptible to concussion because they can't help, you know, the cushion some of that. Yeah. So yes, working on neck muscles. You know, I think really it's working on the skill. So it's practicing, which is kind of hard to communicate, especially to parents who really think, oh my gosh, you know, don't ever head the ball. And like I said in the beginning, it's not about heading the ball. Heading the ball is not where we get concussion. You know, I know there are a few case studies where people have headed the ball like off a punt, and you know, some huge high velocity ball, and they weren't actually meeting the ball, and so they get concussion because they get whiplash concussion. So that is it's not a direct throw, but it's the whiplash. So strengthening any kind of muscles, but I think it's really about teaching good technique and understanding there's just an inherent risk in this sport because 2 people from opposing teams are going to go up for a head ball, and sometimes you're going to clock heads and knock the ball or both, and that's the risk of the sport. But in the end, to your point, I think education is probably the best tool that we have against preventing concussion. And you guys, if you communicate with your players that it's okay to tell you if they feel like they've hit their head, I mean, maybe they just need to sit out half the practice, that's fine. I wouldn't go into the conversation saying, if you tell me you hit your head, you get to sit out, but you know, just letting them know that you're a safe person to come to if they have concern of injury.
Awesome. Thank you.
Just a reminder, policy-wise, if you have a kid that had a concussion on your team and they've been to a doctor with a diagnosed concussion, they need a doctor's note back before they can return to full play. So that doesn't mean they can't return to, you know, coming to practice and doing stuff, but they have to have a doctor's note before they can return to games. And that doctor's note needs to go to Rodrigo and to the manager. So the parent just needs to give it to them and make sure you guys have it.
That kind of goes back to what I was saying before, when you communicate with the parents, just do it via email so that there's a paper train of fact you guys recognize that you recommended the parent think about it. You know, you can't direct them to go to the doctor, but at least you've done your job.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.